Hello everyone, Luke here, looking at something a bit hypothetical relating to Formula 1 today. Now, last weekend we had the Monaco Grand Prix, and 26 years ago, at the 1995 race, that was the last time we saw a full grid of 26 cars, and the grid has gradually declined in numbers over the years. 2012 was the last time we had a 24-car grid, after which HRT left the sport, and after Manor left the sport in 2016, that was the last time we had a 22-car grid. So we've stuck at 20 since then, and teams like Haas and Williams have been in financial difficulties, and there's been talks of the grids reducing further. There's been talks of some teams maybe being allowed to introduce a third car to bump up the sport's numbers. But let's say every team in Formula 1 could have a third car. Who would be driving it, and how would the grid look if that had been introduced at the start of this season? We'll start off then with the reigning Constructors' Champions Mercedes, and this is probably one of the easiest lineups to sort out. Of course, you'd keep Lewis Hamilton, the fantastic World Championship winning driver that he is. You'd keep Valtteri Bottas as well, a very solid performer who can match Lewis on his day. And you'd add in George Russell. We've only seen him once in a Mercedes, and having this three-car scenario would stop all that worrying about who Mercedes would sign next year. They'd just put Russell into the car, and it would be great to see how that lineup works out. And I think it'd probably be the strongest of all the lineups we're going to go through today. So that's Mercedes sorted. Let's move on to Red Bull. Again, like Mercedes, it would be fairly straightforward for Red Bull. Keep Verstappen and Perez, add back into the mix Alexander Albon. They've clearly got faith in the Thai driver. Why else would they have kept him? They didn't keep Kvyat when they got rid of him twice. They didn't keep John McVerne in the fold, Buemi, all the other drivers that have been part of the Red Bull programme and have been ditched over the years. So they clearly like Albon. And I think he'd do better than he would have done last season, purely because he wouldn't be getting consistently thrashed by Verstappen. He'd be closer to Perez. He'd have that closer benchmark. And I think that would just give Alex a bit more confidence. So maybe this would be another really solid lineup. The next team we're looking at, McLaren, don't have as fully fledged of a young driver programme as Red Bull, and probably not even as much as Mercedes as well. So a bit more outside the box thinking is required here. But what they do have is an IndyCar team, and Patricio O'Ward has done an absolutely fantastic job in that team, winning a race earlier on in the season, and his prize for that by Zach Brown is a test in the 2021 McLaren F1 car, so he seems like an obvious choice to put in alongside Lando Norris and Daniel Ricciardo. Just one note of caution on this. McLaren have hired a very experienced IndyCar driver in the past, Michael Andretti, and it didn't exactly go to plan for the American in 1993. Ayrton Senna won multiple races that season, finished second in the championship. Andretti only got one podium. However, O'Ward is younger, so he should be able to adapt easier. He's done a couple of races in Europe before, but as that was a completely different car to what he was used to driving in America, we can't really judge him on that one weekend that he did in F2. I'd be interested to see how the Mexican would perform in Formula 1. Aston Martin would be another straightforward one to sort out. You keep their two current drivers, Sebastian Vettel and Lance Stroll, and add in their reserve, Nico Hülkenberg. It's a solid lineup, but probably not the most spectacular based on recent form. Vettel and Stroll have been fairly evenly matched this season. The German does just look like he's starting to find his feet more, though, in that team. Where you would want to watch out for them, though, is wet conditions. Lance Stroll and Nico Hülkenberg both got their first F1 pole positions in the wet. Sebastian Vettel got his first pole position and first victory in Formula 1 in wet conditions. So once the rain started to fall, I think this would be a lineup to scare the living daylights out of the opposition. As I've mentioned in a previous video, Alpine would probably love the opportunity to have a third car because they've not got a B team, they've not got somewhere to promote their young drivers into. So joining Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon, the obvious choice would be one of their three Formula 2 drivers at the moment. Christian Lundgaard did an extremely good job on his debut season, looks fairly solid so far. You've got Oscar Piastri, won the F3 season with Prema, and he's jumped up into Formula 2 very consistently and very well. But I think they'd probably go for Guan Yu Zhou. He's the most experienced out of the trio, and he brings that commercial aspect in. Even though we've got a budget cap, it wouldn't be too bad to bring in some extra funding from China, because it would mean Renault would have to put in less of their money. So I'm going to go for him to go alongside Ocon and Alonso. For Ferrari, I've gone for Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz and Antonio Giovinazzi, which might seem like a bit of a strange choice. However, it's for similar reasons as to why I've gone for Red Bull to go for Alex Albon for their third car. If Ferrari wanted rid of him, they'd have got rid of him by now. If they wanted rid of Giovinazzi, he'd be gone. This is the third season he's been with Alfa Romeo, and even though they didn't trust him enough to go up to Ferrari last year, perhaps, maybe if there'd have been a third car, they would have done. He's more than matching Kimi Raikkonen this year. Definitely in qualifying, he has the upper hand. Sometimes Kimi has that extra consistency in the races, and I think Ferrari would love that opportunity to sort of give him a free shot in the top team. AlphaTauri, Pierre Gasly, Yuki Tsunoda, and I think they'd have kept Daniel Kvyat in a similar way to the top team, keeping Alex Albon. Yes, he's been ditched twice by AlphaTauri, but looking at their young driver programme at the moment, I don't think Daruvula and Yips would have been quite ready for Formula 1, and Kvyat, he can put in some good performances, and he's still young. He's only 27 years old. He's younger than Antonio Giovinazzi, despite the Russians seeming to have been around forever. So I think if there was a third car, he would have stayed at the Faenza team. For these next three teams, things are a bit more jumbled up in terms of the driver lineup. We'd obviously keep Kimi Raikkonen at Alfa Romeo. He's extremely experienced. He'll help guide the direction of the car, and I think as long as he wants to stay in Formula 1, he'll stay at Alfa Romeo. We can't keep Giovinazzi because we've promoted him up to Ferrari, and I think in real life, if Giovinazzi hadn't have been at Alfa Romeo, Ferrari would have put Mick Schumacher into that seat for 2021 rather than at the Haas team. It's probably a better car to showcase the F2 champions' talents. Now, the final seat in this three-car team, I think it's a bit of a coin toss between Callum Ilott and Robert Kubica. Do you go for the future or do you go for that funding? I don't think Alfa Romeo are that desperate for the money with the Ferrari backing, so Callum Ilott would probably just edge this over the pole. One team that obviously needs the funding, of course, is Haas. It's why Nikita Mazepin was brought into the team, and if they've got three cars, they're desperately going to need even more, so there's no chance of him getting dropped in this scenario. I think for one of the other cars, probably Pietro Fittipaldi. He did do a couple of races last year. He wasn't spectacular. He's not the greatest driver in the world, but he didn't crash the thing. And I think getting thrown into an F1 car that you've never driven before for the final two races, not crashing, is probably about as good as you could have expected. And we're going to keep the bit of a Russian theme that's going on with the Haas team by giving Robert Schwartzman the seat in Formula 1. I've said previously, I think he's probably the most talented out of that Ferrari driver academy that they had last year, or the drivers that they had across F2 in 2020, and it just fits with that Russian theme. He'd be able to bring the SMP racing back in that we've previously seen from Sirotkin on the Williams, so Mazepin, Fittipaldi and Schwartzman would be my choices for Haas. Like Haas, Williams have got to chase the money slightly in all scenarios at the moment, especially if they have got free cars. So Nicholas Latifi, extremely rich backing, does a solid job if not spectacular. I can't see a reason why they'd get rid of him. The other two drivers, I think they'd go for their two full-time F2 driver academy drivers at the moment. Dan Ticktum, yes, he's controversial, but he's a good driver. He's put in some good performances over his 1 and a bit years in F2, so I think he'd get the nod. And Roy Nissany looks to be doing an okay job as well, so I think he'd probably get there over Jack Aitken purely because of funding. You might have to do some inter-team bonding sessions because Nissany and Ticktum did crash into each other in F2 last year, and that's the last thing you'd want if you're at the back of the grid scrambling around to get some points. That's that then. 10 teams, 30 different drivers. If this situation ever happened, I'd imagine there would be some rule changes to Formula 1. The third car probably wouldn't be eligible for Constructors' Championship points. You might get some situations where the same team gets a 1, 2, 3, and that would get a bit dull in terms of the championship. And you'd probably have to expand the points from outside the top 10 to maybe even the top 15. Otherwise, Alfa Romeo, Haas and Williams, I'd be very surprised to ever see them scoring points if you've got Mercedes and Red Bull probably getting all three cars in there on every single occasion. Do I see this happening in the future? No, I don't. But if Formula 1 did lose another team and didn't get a team to replace them, it wouldn't surprise me if they trialled it out. They've shown now that they're not afraid to try new things. Sprint qualifying for this year is an example of one of those. Let me know your thoughts then on my 3-car driver lineups. Who would you put in a different place? Do you agree with me that Mercedes have the strongest team? And how would you see the dynamics working within some of these teams? Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time around. Goodbye.